Class. Today we're going to talk about the Populist Party and then the role of African Americans during this time, as well as immigration and a few other things. So let's get started. I'm going to share my screen with you so you can see this graphic here. This is a very common political cartoon from the time period, and it's depicting a man named William Jennings Bryan, who was the leader of the Populist Party, also known as the People's Party. But it was also comprised of farmers' alliances and the people that were pro-silver, so silverites, people who wanted to use fiat money, which are known as greenbacks. Fiat money is paper money. It is based off the value that the government says it has, instead of using specie. Specie is gold and silver. Now, the reason this cartoon looks the way it does is because William Jennings Bryan was best known during this time period for what was known as his Cross of Gold speech. He was saying that the government was not going to press down upon mankind this crown of thorns or crucify him on a cross of gold. And so the big goals of the Populist Party were to increase money circulation, and they wanted to do that with the unlimited minting of silver. Now, what they do when you increase money in circulation this way, this causes inflation. And with inflation, you have got high prices, but you've also got low interest rates. So this would work out really well for like the farmers. So they would get more money for their crops when they sold them at market. And then when they paid their loans back to the bank, it would cost them less money to pay back their loans. And so they were going to be able to keep more of the money that they earned off of their crops. They also believed in a progressive income tax. That means that they wanted it to, the wealthiest population would pay the highest percentage of the tax. And that's basically what we have now. And then they wanted a limited 8-hour workday instead of the whatever time that the boss wanted you to get there and was going to allow you to leave. Now, the Populist Party, also known as the People's Party, will later become the Progressives. I'm going to switch to a different screen for you. Now, you can see where the Populists had their largest strength. It's going to be in the Midwest with a lot of your farmers, or out further west where you have a lot of silver mines. It was going to be a really good thing for them. This cartoon here is another of the cartoons that is very popular to be used during this time period. It is a patchwork balloon, and you can see where the air is kind of escaping out of the balloon, and it's made of the People's Party. It's made up of farmer alliances and the Knights of Labor and the Greenback Party, and it says a balloon of lunacy down here, or a ship of lunacy, and it is in effect trying to criticize this party as that it can't carry a lot of air, it's not going to last very long. So this is a cartoon that is critical of the People's Party. Now, the reason that the Progressive Party as a third party doesn't make it any further than it does is because there there's a lot of squabbling going on within the party. They're dealing with racism. They're dealing with increased urban population, so they're losing their support in the Midwest. And when William Jennings Bryan does run for president, he's going to run as for the Democrats in the 1896 election, but he's not going to win. And so the Progressive Party as a third party is not going to make it into the White House per se. In fact, no third party ever has. The importance of third parties is that they cause the major parties like the Republicans and the Democrats to have to deal with issues that they would much rather just shovel under the carpet and not have to deal with. And so it's very important to know the importance of third parties and how they propel other issues to the forefront. Now, another area of development going on during this time period is going to be with African Americans. Now, when we get down to the South, the Redeemers, as they're called, have come to power. This is basically right after the end of Reconstruction, so the late 1870s. You're going to have a group of white power brokers in the South that are going to return the South to what's known as the Solid South, and it's going to be controlled by a white power base. And the ones that do that are known as Redeemers. They are going to redeem it back to the way it was. And so these are the Democrats who held political power, and they're going to wage this very aggressive war and assault against African Americans in the South. Their objective is to keep them in a subservient position so that they can maintain their power over them. And so it's very white supremacist. It's very racist. You're going to find that a lot of the African Americans are going to live in your fairly rundown sections of towns, or out in rundown areas of agriculture and stuff like that. Now, they're also going to institute ordinances, local laws that are going to prevent African American men from being able to exercise their rights under the 15th Amendment. They're going to use black codes and Jim Crow laws. Poll taxes and literacy tests are going to keep African American men from being able to vote. They have to be able to prove they can read. Well, most slaves grew up not being able to read, and so they're just learning. And these literacy tests, while you or I may look at it and go, well, that's really easy, but for them, it was a struggle. They had a lot of questions they had to answer in a short amount of time, and they had to get it 100% correct, or they would not pass the test. Poll taxes were where they'd have to pay to vote. Now, yes, this is going to keep poor whites from being able to vote, but a lot of them are going to fall under what's known as the grandfather clause. If your grandfather could vote in the 1860 election, then you could vote as well. Well, most African American, they come from slavery. None of them were voting in the 1860 election. And so it was a very effective way to keep the blacks from being able to vote in the South. There was one of the first motion pictures that is created when the silent film, but it was called Birth of a Nation, and it glorified the KKK. Now, we talked about the KKK before. It comes out of the end of the Civil War. It is a white supremacist group that originally was just to promote white power, but very soon it becomes a very hateful group that's going to attack African Americans. It is probably the most vile, evil group I've ever known anything about in my whole life. I tried really hard once to watch a documentary on the KKK just to get some background information about where they started. I couldn't get past the first 10 minutes. It turned my stomach, and I just had to turn it off. But the KKK is going to rise up in the South. Now, I personally don't believe that the KKK has ever gone away. They will rise to the surface, and then they'll get shoved back down. They'll rise back up, and they'll get shoved back down. But I don't really think they've ever really, truly gone away. In 1896, there's going to be a landmark Supreme Court case known as Plessy versus Ferguson. Now, this is a case that you really need to remember. In 1896, this is going to legalize segregation. The court's going to come back and say, we're going to have separate facilities for whites and blacks, and they're going to be absolutely equal. Really? Yeah. And so this is going to establish for the next 60 years the white side of town, the black side of town, white bathrooms, black bathrooms, that whole kind of thing. Sharecropping is the #1 form of employment for most African American males. Most African American females are going to be housekeepers or washerwomen. But it was a system that was meant to keep sharecroppers poor. Now, not all sharecroppers were black. My grandfather was a sharecropper, but it was the same type of system. The landlord kept the rent just high enough so that the farmer, the sharecropper, could not cover all of it with the profits off of their crops. So it always kept them in this subservient position. Now, these two guys right here, and I gave you these pictures just kind of give you an idea of the differences. Like this right here, this is a black school. That's a white school. This is some of the housing that African Americans lived in. This is African Americans out in the Midwest. Now, the first African Americans to go west are known as exodusters. They are trying to exodus the South and is trying to escape the discrimination of the South and go and move westward. And so they're known as exodusters. Now, these two guys right here are very important people to know. This is W.E.B. Du Bois, and this is Booker T. Washington. They both believed that education was the foundation of any kind of advancement, no matter what. But they differ from that point on. So Booker T. Washington believed that they should go for economic equality first, and they should do it gradually. It was known as gradualism. And he is going to make this speech called the Atlantic Compromise, and where he is going to talk about this, if the white people will accept us more if we gradually work towards equality with them instead of immediately. He is one of the founders of the Tuskegee Institute, now Tuskegee University in Alabama. And he will be invited to the White House by Teddy Roosevelt after Roosevelt becomes president. W.E.B. Du Bois, this guy here, or Du Bois, whichever way you want to say it, he believed that there was a talented tenth that was of African Americans that was going to be able to show everybody else how talented and intelligent and hardworking African Americans were, that would bring everybody else along. And he believed in political equality right now. He was a very accomplished individual. He is the first African American to get a PhD from Harvard University. And he and Ida B. Wells will later on establish the NAACP, which stands for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, which is an organization that is still very active today. And so they both had the same idea and the same end in mind. They just had different means as far as going about getting there. Now, the other group I want to talk about is immigration. You're going to have a whole lot of people trying to get to America. America was known as the land of opportunity. And so they're going to come from different areas and crowd into all the cities in America. Now, we've had three major waves of immigration in our history. The first one was when the first Europeans came over. They came from northwestern Europe. They were white. They were Protestant. They were very familiar with constitutional forms of government. The second wave is the wave we're fixing to talk about, and this group is coming from Southern and Eastern Europe and Asia. They come from Catholic backgrounds or Jewish backgrounds or Buddhist backgrounds, so all different kinds of religions. They speak all different kinds of languages. They have different kinds of food. They come from different kinds of government. And so the ones that were already here are going to put up resistance to the new ones coming in. And then the third wave happens in the mid-20th century, right about the time of the end of the Vietnam War, when you have a new wave of Asians coming in from Southeast Asia, so Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, southern China, that area. And then also, this is when immigration changes from being just from Mexico, south of our border, to being from Central and South America as well. So those are the three different waves of immigration. Now, in these pictures I'm showing you here, they're going to establish intake centers for the different groups coming in. So if you're coming from Europe, if you're from Italy or Russia, Eastern Germany, Bulgaria, that area of the world, then you would, first place you would see would be this right here. This is Ellis Island. You can still go and tour it now. It's right outside of New York City. So you have the Statue of Liberty on one island, and then you have Ellis Island right next to it. And then this one right here, this is Angel Island, and this was over in San Francisco Bay. And once again, if you go to San Francisco, you can see Alcatraz and Angel Island all on the same tour for the same low price. And in both cases, the intake system was very much like herding cattle. That's why I wanted you to see this picture here. They're in very long lines. They'll go through very humiliating medical examinations where the least little bit of thing, you could have red eyes, you could have a slight cough, anything like that is going to put you in quarantine. And you're going to get better or you're not, and if you don't, they're going to send you back. Now, fortunately, not as many get sent back to their home countries as you would fear, but it's going to be a very trying experience. If you've seen the cartoon American Tail about little Five-O-Mouse and his family that come to America, that is a really good analogy of some of the things that happen for these immigrants coming in. As they're coming over on the boats, that's why I wanted you to see this picture here. They're all crowded together down in the bottom of the boat. They're coming over as steerage. So all these different smells, there's no privacy. There is no distinction between what country you're from or what language you're speaking. So they're all coming in together. Now, for $20 more, you could get into a cabin on the same ship coming from the same country, and you would come off the boat at Ellis Island on this side. You'd go across the pier and get on the ferry to go to Manhattan. You didn't have to go through all this. And so all these immigrants are coming in to America, and they are starting to really, really crowd the cities. And this is why America becomes known as a melting pot. Because as they're coming in, they want to assimilate with Americans. A lot of these families will not let their children speak anything but English, even at home. The places that they'll find to live in, especially like in Manhattan, in New York, they're going to kind of group together with people they already know. So and these are going to be called ghettos. Now, don't think of ghetto like we think of it today as a rundown area of town. These are ethnic areas. So Queens and Brooklyn and Harlem are all places where these immigrants are all going to come together, because everybody wants to live at least around people that are similar to them. And that's something about coming to America or migrating across America that is important to know, is that when people move from one place to another, they take the culture they already have and they're going to adapt it to their new environment. Whether they are going from the old country to the new country or going from the East Coast to the West Coast, they're going to adapt their culture they already have to their new environment. Now, as all these immigrants are coming in, they're wanting to learn English, they're wanting to find jobs, they're wanting to find housing, and so there's going to be groups that are going to come together, and they're going to create what is known as settlement houses. And these are places where immigrants can come and take English classes. They can find temporary child care while they go look for a job. There is a bulletin board that has job opportunities on it. They might be able to get a quick bath or a hot meal. So settlement houses are going to pop up everywhere. The most famous one is in Chicago. It's known as Hull House, Hull, Hull House. and its founder is Jane Addams. I can always remember Jane Addams' name because of her last name is spelled with two D's, much like the movie The Addams Family. And so, but you also have, ladies in New York. I tried to tour one of these places in New York. They wanted like $20 to go see one floor of a tenement house. It's like, I don't think I can do that right now. I miss a poor school teacher. So as all these people are coming in, whether it is Europeans coming into New York or Chinese, mostly Chinese, coming in to San Francisco, it's going to make the population in these cities explode. And these cities do not have the infrastructure to be able to accommodate that huge population increase that fast. And so you're going to have instances where the sewage is in the streets. Things like typhus and cholera are going to run rampant because the hygiene is very horrible. There's not a lot of running water inside of these facilities and these tenement houses. Now they're called tenement houses or dumbbell tenements because if you were to look down on them from the top, it would look like a dumbbell, like you would use to exercise with. Now here is an image of what's known as a dumbbell tenement, and you can see by looking at this how it looks like a dumbbell. And originally they were set up so that a family lived on each end. And so you have your front parlor, and then your living room, your bedroom. Okay. None of these places really had a kitchen in them. You might have a hot plate. And you have your fire escape back here. But as the cities became more and more crowded, they started breaking these things up. And so you might have, instead of an apartment on each end, you might break these up into 2 apartments on each end, or maybe 4 apartments on each end. This is the restroom right here in the center. And so everybody would share the same restroom. Okay. This is what one of the stairwells would have looked like. And you may have seen movies that show the inside of one of these buildings, these apartment type complexes, but they are very, very cramped and very easily to where you can transfer any kind of illness from one person to the next because they're filthy and they're crowded, and there's not city sewage like we have today where everything just kind of runs into a pipe and we never see it again. It kind of went right out into the street. And so it's going to cause a lot of issues within these cities. You're also going to have too many people and not enough jobs, and so people are going to be out of work. If you didn't like the conditions at your job, well, that's fine. You can just go on down the road because there's a line all the way down the street ready to take your job. And so you worked whether you were sick or not. You always showed up to work. You worked 6 days a week and sometimes 15, 16-hour days on those days that you worked. Okay, so I'm going to try and show you this slideshow that's going to give you a series of pictures of what life was like during this time period in New York City. I'm hoping that this is going to work.
Spend all your time waiting for that second chance, for a break that would make it okay. There's always silent reverie. You're in the arms of the angel. May you find some comfort here. So tied up in a straight line, and everywhere you turn, there's vultures and thieves at your back. The storm keeps on twisting. You keep on building the lies that you make up for all that you lack. It don't make no difference. Escape one last time. It's easier to believe in this sweet madness, all this glorious sadness that brings me to my knees. In the arms of the angel, fly away from here, from this dark, cold hotel room, and the endlessness that you fear. You are pulled from the wreckage of your silent reverie. In the arms of the angel, may you find some comfort here. You're in the arms of the angel, may you find some comfort here.
And so that is a depiction of what some of the life was like for these people back during this time period. Now, this is going to give rise to groups inside of America that are going to resist this group coming in. And so the rise again of nativism and xenophobia is going to cover the land. People, nativists are people who were born in this country. So native born Americans, not Native Americans, so people born in this country are going to feel like they have more rights and privileges than new immigration coming in. And then that's going to be exasperated with a thing called xenophobia, a fear of foreigners, and that foreigners are going to bring in all these different kinds of things and cause trouble in the United States. It's going to get so bad over on the West Coast with the Chinese coming in that the Californians are going to get Congress to pass the Chinese Exclusionary Act that is going to ban Chinese immigration for 10 years. And so all these Chinese men who have come in and tried to get their lives set up so they could send for their families now can't send for their families. And it's going to be for 10 years, but at the end of that 10 years, they're going to extend it, and then they're going to extend it. I don't believe the Chinese Exclusionary Act really goes away until we get to World War II. Now, there's going to be some others where if you're the son of a Chinaman that's already here, then you can come in. And so there's going to be a lot of Chinese men on this country who are going to have all these sons to bring people into the country. But that's all based out of nativism and xenophobia. Now, also during this time period, you're going to have some other things that are going to go on. You're going to have the Moral Land Grant Act of 1862 that is going to establish public land for colleges, and the Hatch Act, and that's how we're going to get Texas A&M University, and that's A&M in its early days. So you have money for agricultural schools, and that's what the A&M stands for. It's Texas Agricultural and Mechanical University. We just don't call it that anymore, just Texas A&M. You've also got the rise of newspaper publishing. Now you have big companies that can put newspapers out at a very rapid rate. And so this man here, Joseph Pulitzer, and this man here, William Randolph Hearst, are going to become competitive newspaper publishers and editors. And that's going to lead to something called yellow journalism that we'll talk about, especially once we get into American foreign policy. In literature, it's going to go into realism. Stories are going to be more about what really goes on. And one of the more popular is going to be this guy right here, Mark Twain. He's also known as Samuel Clemens. But you're going to have, stories about what really happened. So Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn. But everybody's going to get really into these things called penny dreadfuls. In England, they were called shilling shockers, and they are murder mysteries, and everybody is quite scandalous for reading these kinds of books. But at the end of the 19th century, you're going to have the novel. Before this time, novels came out a chapter a week or a chapter a month in the magazines. I can't imagine having to read Harry Potter a chapter at a time. I am a Harry Potter fan. And if I had a hard time having to wait from one book to the next. Having to wait from one chapter to the next would have driven me nuts. But so at the end of the 19th century, now you're starting to get whole novels where all the chapters are together in one book. Department stores are going to become more prevalent, like Macy's and stuff like that. In art, you're going to have what's known as the Ashcan School of Art, where art depicts what actually happened. So a lot of those pictures you saw in the slideshow that were not photographs, that comes out of the Ashcan School of Art. Also, realism. And then music came from Tin Pan Alley, which was a section of New York City. It was a ragtime, so it was very bouncy music. And the entertainment was vaudeville. Vaudeville is a variety show. So you'd have a reading, and then a song and dance act, and then a sketch, a comedy guy. So it's all these different kinds of entertainment all in one evening. Now, don't confuse vaudeville with burlesque. Burlesque was a girly show that men would go to. Vaudeville was just all different kinds of entertainment. If you've seen the movie White Christmas that comes out at Christmas, the guys are putting together basically a vaudeville show. It's a variety show. And so these are all the conditions that are in place at the end of the 19th century. But there are people that are starting to look at things and go, things just aren't quite right. We need to have more of equality. We need to have better conditions. People need to be able to earn a living wage, and they need to be able to live in housing that is clean and sanitary. And so as we get into next week's lecture, we're going to start talking about the progressives. And these are all the reforms that are going to be put into place to address all of the ills of the Gilded Age.